Okay, artificial selection. Really doesn't have much to do with evolution or the concept of evolution. Artificial selection is where humans choose to mate different organisms together to produce specific traits. Okay? Good example is what we just watched there, and even more so than that, example would be dog breeding. People choose to breed animals that have qualities they like. Okay, so you know, Salukis and Greyhounds are fast. My dog Benny, he's a beagle, which beagles were used for what?
Hunting.
Yeah, hunting small game. So like he sees a squirrel in the yard, he tears off after it. He wants that, but he also likes to dig stuff up, and he's pretty gross about stuff. So yeah, and so anyway, each dog has their different characteristics or traits. Sheepdogs love to chase. That's what they do. I'm going to a sheep show this weekend, and in Waterloo, Illinois, and they have like sheepdogs on display, and basically they blow a whistle, and the dog will round the sheep up and get down on the ground and start chasing them, and so it basically can shepherd the dogs and bring them, or shepherd the sheep, bring them where they're supposed to go. They're bred for all kinds of different things. You know, there's show dogs that are bred for, you know, their curly fur and how pretty they are and stuff. That's artificial selection. Lots of other examples. Pretty much any animal that you would buy meat from, cow, pig, so on and so forth, those are very rarely anymore, especially cows, are very rarely breed naturally. Very rarely does a bull pick a cow and reproduce anymore. It's all even artificial insemination. Like they'll choose the eggs from this cow and the sperm from this bull and put them together and make whatever cows they want. So artificial selection, we end up with it's artificial because we choose. Humans are choosing, which is much, much different than natural selection. Natural selection, okay, in this case we have nature decides which organisms, not just animals, which organisms live on to reproduce. Okay. Those best fit to survive will live on to reproduce. Okay, so here's a question for you. We watched this video about how foxes were bred to become more docile until eventually they have domesticated pets, and I surmise this is probably how dogs became pets to begin with, and cats became pets to begin with, is because there were some that were chosen because they were a little more docile. They get along a little better with people, and then those were bred until finally we have all the species and variations and so on and so forth of dogs. I say species, I shouldn't use that word, because all domestic dogs are the same species, because any one of those dogs technically could reproduce with any one of the other dogs. because they're all still the same species, but they're different subspecies. They're different appearances and so on and so forth. But would that type of selection happen in the wild? What do you think? Where dogs would eventually become more docile and friendly toward people? Why not? Why do you think that that wouldn't occur in the wild?
Because they don't like, because they don't purposefully mate with someone who is, or some other animal who is naturally calm or something like that.
Right. In nature, a lot of times it's the strongest that survive. These animals are set up the way that they are so that they can live. They have to be aggressive to fight, to survive, against their predators, to be able to capture their prey. That's why they ended up looking more and more homogenized. If you look out in nature right now, what color are squirrels? Yeah, it's sort of brownish gray, which is very similar to the color of what? Tree bark. There's a reason for that. Because the ones that weren't the same color as tree bark were easy to find by predatory hawks and birds and other things that think squirrels are tasty treats. Okay? There's a lot of other things. Their claws can easily grip the bark of trees and climb super fast. That's examples of natural selection. Now, evolution really doesn't happen like, oh, hey, this thing needs to have needs to have wings to survive. Oh, all of a sudden, go gadget wings. It evolves wings. It's not how it works. Typically, what happens is this. Evolution is basically a change in allele frequencies. Over time, you see different alleles that make it more likely for an organism to survive. Well, those are going to increase in number and the other ones are going to decrease in number. Change in allele frequencies over time. Okay? Alleles that help an organism survive are selected for. Others are selected against. So that's evolution in a nutshell. We're gonna try sort of a class experiment on this on Thursday of this week. Survival of the fittest. Oh, sorry. Where we're going to be different species of crabs trying to capture prey, and if you capture a certain number of prey, you live on, and if you don't, you die. Perhaps go extinct. Okay, that's nature. It's rough. Okay. So, allele frequencies. How often in a population that an allele can occur? Okay. So, variations. Let's talk about this. Where do variations in phenotype come from? In other words, how something looks, claw shape, beak length, shell type. Where do these variations come from?
What's that say about phenotype?
How something looks. Remember we talked about that when we did our Mendelian genetics, like yellow seeds and wrinkled seeds. Where do these variations come from, gang?
Genetics.
Right, yeah. Differences in genes. Okay, so that's one, the differences in genes. Okay, so they may have a different allele for a gene. Okay, can also be a difference in gene what? As we watched from the video we watched with the Darwin Never Knew. It's not just that they have certain types of genes or don't have other certain types of genes, that those genes are what?
Turned on and off.
Yeah, gene switches. That's the difference between our cells. If you think about it, we've got cells in our body that operate like electrical wires. They're nerve cells. We have cells that can lift weights. We have cells that can just store fat and stuff. We have a variety of different types of cells. But wrap your head around this. We all started as one fertilized egg. Each one of us in this classroom at one point in our life was just one cell, one fertilized egg, and then divided to produce you with limbs and the ability to read and write and say things and walk and so on and so forth. Well, what makes my nerve cells different than my muscle cells, they all have the same genetic information. It's just that certain parts of that gene are switched on or switched off to make those cells differentiate to do different jobs. Okay? And then there's something else that so we can inherit differences in genes that already exist. There can be differences in gene switches. There's one other thing too, mutations. Okay? Mutations. Now, you think of mutations in the context of like X-Men, you think, oh, there's a mutation and all of a sudden now I've got laser beams for eyes. Now all of a sudden I can control people with my mind, or I can control all metal. Typically, most mutations cause something to go wrong, or damage, or no longer work, or most mutations actually don't do anything. Okay? So changes in existing genetic code. So there are a number of differences in genes that already exist, the sequence of letters, differences in gene switches, they're turned on or off, or changes that to the existing genetic code, something happens to change that. And then these will have a different result in different organisms, and those that are best suited to survive will, and those that are not will not survive. So we're going to we're going to kind of explore how these things can play a factor in survival, like I said then again on Thursday.